Where is he?
Where are you? Skull Rock. Do you know it?
Hello, everybody. This is Stacy over at the Skull Rock broadcast. I'm here with.
Hello, I'm Megan. Welcome back to our Stranger Things podcast. Happy to be back. Excited for this episode today. I mean, we're always excited, but we're having a lot of fun with this rewatch. So we are super excited to do our deep dive this week on season 1, episode 2, which is called
The Weirdo on Maple Street.
Yes, it's going to be so much fun. We have lots to talk about, but how are you?
I'm good. I'm actually on my spring break now.
Yay.
Being like a crazy Stacy that I am, I'm dog sitting again. I'm dog sitting Finn the Golden Lab that I've dog sat before, and Nala, no idea what the dog's name is, guys. And that's a Golden Poodle. So, we're just going with the flow, man. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Not on spring break. I'm jealous, but I had my spring break a couple weeks ago.
True.
But doing okay. I mean, counting down the days until summer at this point. So
we got this, man.
When is your last day of school?
I want to say it's like June 12th, maybe, which I was like, that's a little early, but you know what? At this point, I'll take it. So I'm ready to make a little paper chain and just have the kids rip one apart each day, because I need a visual representation of the countdown right now at this point.
Yeah, that's a great idea. I love doing that. Yeah, ours is June 14th.
Nice.
We'll be done around the same time. That's exciting.
Love that.
What's going on with some of our favorite Stranger Things cast members this week? Do we have any updates?
Well, this was pretty exciting. So Joseph Quinn was at CinemaCon, where apparently at first there were rumors that we were going to see an extended trailer and the first look at Gladiator 2, but I think it was only for the press at the event. So unfortunately, we haven't gotten any clips of, either the extended trailer for A Quiet Place Day 1 or anything for Gladiator 2, but we did hear the reactions from the audience. And literally everyone is saying how absolutely insane Gladiator 2 sounds. And just the few things that I heard that was featured, like, I guess Joseph Quinn is going to be blonde in it, which, okay, sign me up. And I heard like somebody fights a rhinoceros, that there's an arena filled with... I was like, how? What? But this is what made me start cracking up, because it's so over the top. Of course, it would be used in a sequel. They're going to flood an arena, and there's going to be sharks, and the gladiators have to jump from boat to boat. And I guess just frickin' JQ is going to be doing the iconic Joaquin Phoenix thumbs up, thumbs down. And everyone's saying that he stole the show in the trailer, that he just looks like a complete maniac, which, we really haven't seen him play a villain yet, but he just looks like that kind of actor that would just have a ball with that kind of role. So I am really, really pumped. And then he was there with Lupita, his co-star for Quiet Place Day 1. And everyone
They're beautiful. Oh my gosh.
Gorgeous together. What's on?
And she just wears sparkles every day of her life. And I'm here for it.
Yeah, absolutely love it. And I just love their friendship. And I love that, he won breakout performance, and his speech was classic JQ, short, sweet, kind of funny, the awkward little giggle in the beginning, but I think this is just to show he's on the verge of some really, really big stuff. So cannot wait to see these new projects come out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool that he's getting this recognition and that he's getting to have some really breakout roles in film, which I know he's excited about, because a lot of his career so far has been on the stage and then in television. So he was talking a lot about how it's so special to be able to be in films that are shown in movie theaters. So excited to see that man on the big screen. Joe Keery is, still doing all the press, all the interviews, all the radio shows for End of Beginning. And I just remembered that video of Maya talking about Joe and
I
saying
loved
how
that.
excited she was for him. I think she was doing Navy press for like Wildcat, her
Mhm.
new movie coming out, but she was asked if she would ever collaborate with him on music, which I know we've like joked about before too.
Mm.
And I think she's totally right that anything that they did together, just their popularity because of the show would kind
Yeah.
of overshadow like the music. So it'd be a while before anything like that happened. But she said that they do kind of talk about music all the time and like listen to each other's music. And she was super supportive of his like recent success. But we listened to a really cool interview. I think it's
Mm.
one of the best interviews I've heard him do so far. It was a show called Switched on Pop, and they talked to Joe about his music, and they actually like really dove into the whole album, Decide, and played clips from the different songs and asked Joe about like, you know, where he was coming from and the process of making the songs, and just got really deep into like some of his influences. And it was a really fascinating conversation.
Did you hear that I guess, like, he was spotted this weekend in Chicago, and
He was at
everyone's
like an art museum or
he was at
something.
an art museum, and then he went to some fast food place, and literally everyone's like, "Look, Joe Keery's back in Chicago."
Oh no, he's never gonna live that down now, is
Never.
he?
Never.
Updates about our Upside Down convention in October.
Mm.
What's going on with that, Stacy?
So they made another guest announcement the other day, very exciting, and Grace, who played Chrissy Cunningham, is going to be a guest, which I know a lot of people are excited about because Grace is a regular at a lot of conventions, and if you haven't had the chance or the pleasure to meet her, do it. She is a complete and total sweetheart.
That should be really fun.
Let's put the flashlights in the plastic bags. Let's take off our Steve Harrington yellow cozy sweatshirts and let's dive on in.
Let's do it. That was great. Episode 2. What was your kind of just like initial reaction to this episode?
There's a lot packed into this one episode. We're switching around a lot. We're in different locations. We're introducing new characters. We're all over the place, but it is one hell of an episode. And I always did like I always love the chapter titles because who doesn't love those intros? But I felt like the Weirdo on Maple Street was a play on the Twilight Zone short story and episode, The Monsters Are Due on Maple Street. So I thought that was really cool.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about what the reference was because it sounds so familiar.
Hmm. There's a great movie from 1995 with Dermot Mulroney and Kyle MacLachlan and Elizabeth Shue called The Trigger Effect. And it's loosely based off that Twilight Zone episode of a blackout that happens in Los Angeles and how these people in a suburban neighborhood kind of act like monsters. So that was kind of like how I recognized it.
Okay. In this episode, we start once again in the basement of Mike Wheeler's house. They get settled down there and they kind of just start, you know, talking about her and trying to figure out what's going on with her. They're kind of like freaked out by her for sure, which I mean, she's a little different. She doesn't look quite normal with her shaved head, her oversized Benny's Burgers t-shirt.
I do love, like, what they ask her is what probably a bunch of 12-year-old boys would ask. They're like, do you have cancer? Like, are you all right? Or are you from the hospital? And my friend Jackie mentioned it. She said her favorite moment is when Dustin goes, maybe she's deaf. And he claps and she finches and he goes, not deaf.
Not down. Exactly. So there was just a lot of really funny moments because like obviously they say that she can have some warm clothes, kind of get
Hmm.
changed since she's all wet. And
I can't.
the fact that she like, you know, starts to try to change her clothes right in front of them and they all freak out as
Yep.
12-year-old boys would. But then the funniest part I think of that situation is that Dustin like 3 or 4 more times imitates what
Yep.
she did
He's
by
horrified.
like making the motion of her like pulling her shirt up. And he like at one point like knocks his hat off. And I don't even know if that was like intentional. You could kind of see that humor that Dustin has kind of
Yeah.
like come out right away.
I like that Penhurst is mentioned.
Exactly. So Penhurst is mentioned, which we come back to in season 4, which is the asylum that Victor Creel is at. And also humorous was when Lucas brings up Penhurst, Dustin's like, "Oh, you got a lot of family there."
I love that. Their rapport is just so good. And I love that, kind of Mike is like, she can stay down here. The plan is tomorrow morning, she'll ring the front door. Our mom will figure it out. Classic 12-year-olds, the grown-ups will figure it out. So Al kind of camps down in the, makeshift tent that they have made out of sheets because everyone loves to build in a fort back then. And
Absolutely.
this is when he notices the tattoo. Can we talk about that?
I mean, he's such a sweetheart giving her clothes. It's funny because, the whole like leave the door open 3 inches that was like Hopper in season 3, like that actually kind of like starts between the two of them because she doesn't want to close the door all the way.
Yeah.
She doesn't really like being like locked in, which we find out later a little bit more about that. Mike sees the tattoo and he tries to like not act shocked. He's like, "Oh, that's cool. I've just
Yeah.
never seen a kid with a tattoo before." And she tells him that she's 11 and he's the one who actually gives her the nickname of
Yeah.
L, short for 11. So
Aw.
I thought that that was just a sweet moment between the two of them. And the only other thing that I kind of noticed in that scene was I'm starting to just notice like some things with like the storms and the weather.
Mm.
And I don't know if there might be like a connection there between like things that are going on in the Upside Down and then the weather in Hawkins. I'm just like super curious about that.
Because there's like a bad storm that night. So, after she says, which is just so sweet, her saying, "Good night, Mike," just in this soft, little innocent voice, she's in the tent, but she's kind of like flinching a little bit from the sound of thunder,
Yeah.
So
Yep.
there's that.
Exactly.
We open up with the power company actually working on the phone lines, and Jonathan's kind of like serving breakfast for his mother, and you can see he's trying to prevent her from spiraling because I can only imagine what's going through Joyce's head. And she's, telling him he needs to get to the Xerox place because this is a small town. There is no Staples.
Yeah. If you don't know what Xerox is,
Yeah.
it's like a copy machine.
Mhm. We're going old school here, guys. And that's basically what you had to do back then. So it's her trying to calculate the cost. And, she's just a nervous wreck. And he's telling her, like, you can't get this way. And then there's a knock on the door, and it is Hopper.
Yeah, and I also just wanted to point out that it was really funny because she was saying something about having Karen take him to the Xerox store. I think she was kind of just like in her spiral thinking of like,
Maybe didn't want him to be alone, maybe.
right, because I mean, he obviously ends up driving himself and he's going to the Xerox place to make copies of the missing poster that they
Yeah,
made the night before, which that missing poster also becomes kind of like iconic, I think,
iconic.
for
Yeah.
this show as well. But there's a knock on the door and it's Hopper. He's kind of looking at the burnt up phone because
Mm.
that's what happened the night before on the end of the first episode as well. I thought it was interesting that Jonathan asks if they can trace the call, and I just don't know like when that kind of like technology was created.
Psycho 2, which I highly recommend if you're a fan of the original. It was 82 or 83 that movie came out, and they actually asked, can we tap the, Bates Motel telephones? And they're like, this isn't Washington, D.C. This is a small town. That's not how it works. And
Yeah.
from what I know from other movies back then, you had to keep the person on a certain amount of time as well. So obviously a small town like Hawkins, they wouldn't be able to, but I do like that when Joyce is like, I've been calling you for hours, and him kind of going like, a little bit of trust here. We've been searching all night. And there's just this really like heartbreaking moment when she's saying that it was Will, and he's kind of dismissing it, Hopper, saying like, the crazies come out for attention. It was probably somebody just messing with you, which Jonathan's horrified at. And she's like, no, I know it was Will. I know my son's breathing. Wouldn't you know if it was your daughter's? And clearly she knows, what had happened
About
to Sarah.
Sarah.
But
Yeah.
just the subtle acting, because like Joyce almost looks like a little like, ooh, but she's disgusted and exhausted. And Hopper clearly looks hurt, but like takes a deep breath and continues asking, have you heard from Lonnie?
And then they try to figure out like who's gonna get in touch with Lonnie because Jonathan says that he should go. Hopper says like, no, stay with your mom. She needs you. But
Mm-hmm.
a couple other things that I noticed. So you see it, the power lines, the people working on the power lines outside from the storm. But when they open in the buyer's house, they like open the shot on like an old school radio. So I was like, this
Mm-hmm.
continuation of this theme of like radios
Communication through
and
radio. Yep.
communication and phones and stuff like that. So I thought that that was interesting. And then also, oh, we forgot to say before when we had that mention of Penhurst, they also named dropped Michael Myers. They were like, maybe she's a psycho
Oh,
like
yeah.
Michael Myers. I liked that they mentioned that already too in like the second episode, and then it comes back. So we always have these things kind of like coming back and these common threads, which is cool.
I do like that Jonathan says, let me go look for Will. He's good at hiding. He mentions that, which they actually, he is. He sees the cops. He's going to think he is in trouble. Let me go to Lonnie's, which I do like that he says Lonnie instead of like my dad, which Lonnie, you piece of shit. And he goes, he's really good at hiding. And Hopper's like, stay with your mother. Like cops are good at finding, and has to be a little gruff with him. But that is something that comes back later on in the season that thank God Will was good at freaking hiding because he would have been toast.
So then we go to breakfast at the Wheeler household once again.
Iconic shot.
Always with the bickering between Mike and Nancy at the breakfast table and the dinner table. Like that continues in this episode.
So good.
What are they having for breakfast today? Not eggs,
But Eggos.
Eggo waffles.
The official Stranger Things food. I do like the little, what were you studying again, Nancy? What was it?
Human anatomy. Did you get a lot of studying done last night?
So good.
Yeah, that was so funny.
He brings her the Eggos and she's kind of messing with the radio, the handheld radio. And he mentions that the signal's kind of weak, but he's usually able to get Lucas because he lives the closest. And he kind of goes through the plan like, okay, this is what you're going to do. You're going to ring the doorbell. My mom's going to help you. Well, 11 knows what happened to poor Benny. And she just goes, no. And he's like, what? And she's like, no. And just that, like the music change of her, like doing the gun motion to her head, kind of explaining if we do this, the bad people will come. And the message is very clear to Mike that this is actually much more serious.
Then you see that all the phones are tapped.
Yep. We see basically the lab going in now that Joyce and Jonathan aren't home. And, they radio in and they look like they're the phone company, but really you see them in suits. You see Bremer and they're going in and basically bugging the house.
So you see that they kind of like are sort of watching everything. So you're getting a little bit more of a sense of these people at the lab. Then we also see the search party is continuing.
Still going on. Yep.
They've got dogs with the search party, which I noticed because, again, Leia was very interested.
Dog perks his head up like, oh, my cousins.
They are talking about Joyce. So Hopper's out with his deputies. I think it's Powell says like, well, wasn't she already kind of like a little
She was a
crazy?
few steps from going over the edge. Yep.
Yeah. And Hopper defends her,
which I like.
Her child is missing and he walks away and they kind of imply that they have some history together.
Yeah. Classic Callahan just going like, her and the chief, they screwed, right? And just Powell looks disgusted and walks away and he's like, right? I love that. They are just like, I love both officers, but they're such like, they're playing almost like such goofs, especially as the seasons go on that you're like, oh my God, what the hell? But, I do like that Hopper almost says like, her kid's missing. Let's show a little class, because that's absolutely right. Like, if you were a parent, you would be going crazy. We go to the high school where I do, even though I hate Carol and Tommy, Steve's friends, I hate the characters. The actors are fantastic, but I do
Yeah.
love that Barb is like, doing what we had to do back in the day. This was really before the internet. So they're doing flashcards and she's testing, quizzing Nancy before her test. And I love that Steve takes the flashcards and she's like, hey, and then Tommy gives her like a wet willy in the ear. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'd flip. And, Steve just looks amazing in that green aqua color shirt. He's serving it. But I do love that Nancy's such a good girl when we get just a little taste. Steve's dad, whatever he does, he has to travel for.
Right.
And his mom's going with him because she doesn't trust him, which I do love that, Tommy's a good idea. And Nancy's a little clueless when he's like, so, you game? And Nancy's like, for what? And they go, big house, no parents. And she's like, a party. And I do love her response. It's Tuesday. Are you kidding me? So they're planning on having a little get together at Casa de Harrington, which I think is just fantastic. So that little glimpse of Steve's life, you kind of see the people that he's hanging with and kind of what's a priority right now. Because for people like Steve and Carol and Tommy, they're not affected by Will going missing. And I do like that you see poor Jonathan. He's clearly already made the Xerox copies and he's putting the flyer up on the bulletin board in the hallway. And I do hate that Tommy's like, I bet you he had something to do with it or he killed them. And I do like that Steve, even though he doesn't defend Jonathan, he's like, come on, man. And Nancy's the only one that approaches him.
Yeah. So I did like this scene because in the first episode, Barb mentions to Nancy, if we have to hang out with Carol and Tommy H, I'm going to be so upset. And I get it because they're pretty awful.
Yeah.
But these are Steve's friends. And you can see that Tommy and Carol are really awful to Jonathan and Nancy tries to be kind. But I wanted to point something out. Jonathan is hanging up the missing poster, right?
Okay.
Of Will. He's wearing this jacket with the collar.
Yeah.
You know who's wearing a very similar jacket and hanging up a missing poster?
In season 4.
In season 4, Wayne Munson.
Yep. Isn't it exactly the same jacket, basically?
Yeah. It's almost the
Girl.
exact same jacket, the exact same, hanging up a missing poster on a bulletin board, because in season 4, there's lots of people missing after the quote unquote earthquake.
Yeah.
But I just liked that detail of them both wearing that same jacket. And I mean, it was a popular style of jacket. It's not super out of context or whatever for them to be wearing it. But I don't know. It's that little hint of oh, well, Will, he was missing in the Upside Down and he survived. So, us being our delusional selves.
Yeah. And I do love that, even though it isn't that actor at all, it's just an actor with longer, dark, kind of curly hair. I love that a lot of people are like, look, it's Eddie, because you never see the actor's face. But it looks like there's somebody that looks kind of like Eddie in the background. So us Eddie fans are with our opera glasses going look at that. But just a really nice scene.
Yeah, there's a lot of scenes, I think, throughout that people have been like, oh, he's always been there. And obviously he has always been there.
Yeah.
Going to the school, but trying to find people that look like him in the background of shots.
Hysterical. Move on up the hill to the middle school, where in Mr. Clark's room, Dustin and Lucas notice that Mike is not at school.
Right. So Mike is not at school. Dustin is this whole episode wearing some sort of drama club shirt. Did you notice that?
That's so cute.
I feel like they don't usually talk about him being in drama club, but I feel like that's kind of a nod to Gaten being a drama kid. So
yes, theater
was
kid
really funny.
energy.
Yeah, for sure. But Lucas, I love Lucas's energy of this whole season. He's so concerned about finding Will.
Yep.
And obviously they all have such a strong friendship, but I think a lot of people kind of didn't love his negativity towards Elle the whole season, but you could kind of understand that, like,
Yep.
he's like, we need to keep this focus on finding our friend.
Yep.
You guys are getting distracted by, like,
The weirdo.
yes, this weirdo.
And I like we don't reveal this until I think an episode or so later, but you do learn that Lucas's dad was in Vietnam. And we only really see like a scene or so with his parents. But, maybe that would kind of shows you like he was taught, that if a friend is in need, you need to help. You need to like go about your mission. You need to stay focused. So he's a little annoyed as any kid would be because
Yeah.
suddenly his best friend is, kind of mooning over this, weirdo. And like you said, they're losing focus. So I do love that Dustin is like, oh my God, what if Mike got caught? What if, Mrs. Wheeler found out a girl slept over? What if she slept naked because he's still traumatized from the night before?
He was so traumatized. But then we do cut back to the Wheelers' house. Mom's leaving in the station wagon.
Yep. Love
going
that.
to the store with Holly, I guess. And I think it was Karen leaving in the station wagon, right?
Yep.
I always wonder, like, what Ted Wheeler drives. Like, do we ever see his
Because you
car?
never see his car.
Yeah,
He bikes
interesting.
to work.
Maybe. But Mike goes home to check on 11, and they're kind of checking out the rest of the house.
Mhm.
11 is looking at the family photos. That's when she sees the photo of Nancy and says, pretty.
And I love Mike's reaction. He's like, I guess so.
I guess.
And it's such a like mirrored scene from Elliot showing E.T. around the house because much like E.T., but less terrifying, Elle has never seen like an actual house, a television, other people, family portraits. So this is all brand new to her.
And then they take a spin on the lazy boy, right?
That looked comfortable.
I do like when they go upstairs to Mike's room and he's showing her his toys and he shows her Yoda, right?
I thought of you
So
instantly. Instantly. I was like, Megan right now is doing the Leo meme, just pointing.
he tells Elle before he even knows about her powers, right? Like, oh, Yoda can move things with his
With
mind.
his mind.
And then
Yep.
he's like this and just like shoves everything
And just
off
the
the
expression
table.
on her face, too, just kind of looking. Do you love how earlier, too, he brags about his television? It's a 22-inch that's 10 inches bigger than Dustin's.
I was like, come on, Mike, you're not a math nerd, I guess. It's really funny because what he says, like he makes Yoda like pretend to talk, like he talks in like a Yoda voice, and he's
Mhm.
like, ready are you? What knows you of ready? Which is exactly the line that I keep pointing out in season 4 is like Brenner is telling Elle she's not ready. So it's like that's the line of
I wish
Yoda
you
that
guys
they
could see my
choose.
expression because I'm like, touche, Megan. Holy shit.
I mean, Yoda has lots of like iconic lines, like
Yeah.
do or do not, like there is no try, right? Like that's what I would like think of right away. Or
Yeah.
there's some other iconic ones, but like the fact that they chose that line that then they called back in season 4, I love it.
We go to Jonathan driving his car and he's listening to The Clash, which is playing the iconic song from the
Should I
season.
stay or should I go?
And I think this is a pretty important scene because it makes him remember back when probably a year or so ago when Lonnie was supposed to take Will out to a baseball game. But Lonnie ended up not showing. And you can hear Joyce like ripping him a new one over the phone, being like, you do this all the time. So clearly this isn't something new. And Jonathan is showing Will this like mix that he made. And he's like, oh, it has all the best Joy Division, Television, Bowie, The Smith, which are all bangers. And he even says like, do you like it? And he's like, yeah. And then he kind of notices Will kind of like getting down, hearing Joyce yelling over the phone. So Jonathan, just being such a good big brother, trying to protect him, goes and shuts the door to try to muffle the noise. And he kind of like is like, you don't even like baseball, you know? And he's like, yeah, well, sometimes it's fun. He's like, why doesn't dad or Lonnie, why doesn't he ever, take you to something that you actually like the arcade? And he says he's always trying to turn you into somebody that you're not. And he mentions like, you like the Clash, right? And he's like, yeah. And he kind of tells him like, oh, you can keep this mix. So it's this nice little like memory of them bonding together.
I like Jonathan's like iconic line here where he tells Will, "You shouldn't like things because people tell you you're supposed to."
Mm-hmm.
So,
Words to live by.
yeah, exactly. I love just like the posters in Jonathan's bedroom. I kind of like want at some point to like do a deep dive of like the posters in Jonathan's bedroom, all of the stuff in like Mike Wheeler's room, Mike Wheeler's basement.
That would
Like there's
actually
just
be a
so
lot of fun to do
yeah.
because the set dressers, and I'm sure the Duffers have something to do with that, they cram so much in. Like we know in Will's bedroom, there's a Jaws poster, and we do know that there's an Evil Dead poster in Jonathan's room. But
Yep.
like maybe a future episode idea is we could take a look at the bedrooms throughout the seasons and kind of see which toys we recognize or what music or movie posters. That'd be awesome. Great
Yeah,
idea, Megan.
I think that would be really cool. Then we go to downtown Hawkins, which
Yep.
did you get excited when you saw downtown Hawkins, Stacy?
You know I did. I'm going to be like a kid in a candy store. I'm going to be the tourist that's just somehow I'm going to have a disposable camera, guys, instead of my phone. I'm just going to be taking pictures, crying and sniffling. It's going to be bad.
Yeah, so that's filmed in Jackson, Georgia, which is where the convention that we're going to in October will be held.
Yep.
And I've been to Jackson, Georgia. It's very cool.
Now, what's the name of the general store that Joyce works at?
I think it's called Melvault. Is that right?
That sounds about right. And it's basically like they had stores like this, almost like a five and dime, where they had like everything you needed all in one place. And Joyce works there from season 1 to season 3, because season 3, it's going out of business due to the Starcourt Mall. And she goes in, and I love that the manager, the boss, is like, Joyce, I'm having, Kenny come in to cover your shift. And she's like, I'm not here to work. And she goes and buys a telephone. She, first of all, like doesn't have any money. So she's like, oh, I gave the last of my money to Jonathan. And he's like, yes, of course. And then she asks for an advance, and he starts filling it out, and she looks, and then she goes, I was thinking 2 weeks. And kind of like a dick move on his part. He's like, yes, well, I have to pay Kenny for coming in. And that's when Joyce does what I'm sure anybody who's ever worked in retail has wanted to say to their boss or manager. And she basically says that she has worked here X amount of years, has never called in sick, which is insane, has never missed a day of work, has worked Thanksgiving and Christmas Eve. And she's like, my boy is missing. And she starts choking up, which, what a phenomenal actress. And she's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to see him again. And she's like, I need this phone and a 2-week advance. And then I love that he's like, okay. And he starts writing it out. And then she just looks at him and goes, and a pack of Camels. Legend, queen. And I love the expression on the boss's face as he looks at her like, are you for real? But I'm like, if anybody needs a cigarette right now, it's that woman.
Yeah, and I do love that there's like Christmas music playing in the store.
Yeah.
Because it is like, beginning of November. It's a little early for Christmas music, but I'm all about Christmas music in November.
Why not?
So then we go back to the buyer's house, I think, and we see the people in the white suits kind of coming in, and they check out the shed. So obviously what we talked about in the first episode with some sort of portal situation happening in the shed, they go in and they find that their like sensors are really buzzing in there, and then they do kind of see some of the like upside down stuff like down on like a vent in the bottom of the shed. So this week I had this like thought, how Vecna has like his lair in like the Creel house in season 4? What if he was kind of like hanging out in the shed and that was like his like lair.
Oh my God, that's terrifying.
I was thinking that, but then also like I don't know that Will would be like hanging out at his house so close if
Yeah.
like that was the case, but that was kind of what I was like picturing in my head. Like that was his kind of like spot.
It's just Vecna sipping a coffee, sitting in the shed, looking out the dirty window. I can imagine that. Karen comes home actually from shopping. She's got little baby Holly in her arms, talking about macaroni. I always picked up on that. True Italian. I'm like, they're talking about making macaroni. Sweet. And that's when Mike's like in a panic, like, oh shit, because she can hear him upstairs. And she's like, Ted, like, is somebody home? So he has to hide 11. And he asks her to hide in the closet. And she's hesitant, kind of scared. And that's when he says, like, kind of the promise thing. He explains what promise means and has her hide in the closet, which we now learn quite quickly why she doesn't like doors being closed.
Yeah, because when he closes her into the closet, she kind of has a flashback memory. And it was interesting because I guess like we've watched this so many times now at this point, but this is the first scene where we see 11 at the lab. And the
Yeah.
fact that she is connected to these people, like we obviously had suspicions of that based on the fact that they're kind of trying to find her. But we see them kind of like throwing her into a room and we see Brenner for the first time.
Yeah.
And she's like calling him Papa.
Which is just so heartbreaking, because, you really don't know. Is he biologically her dad? You have no idea what the contents of it is, but the guards kind of throw her in and she's pounding on the door and she's so scared. So we go downstairs and it's Mike kind of like confessing and he's like, I wasn't feeling too good. My throat was scratchy. And last time I said I was sick, you still made me go to school. And I have to honestly say that day that you picked Karen for being like the best mom, I do have to start agreeing with you because she literally is she understands his friend is missing, could possibly be dead. And she's like, Mike, yet again, a line that she keeps repeating to Nancy, I want you to feel like you can talk to me. It's all right. And she's very like sweet and understanding about it. And then she hears a noise and she's like, is somebody else here? And he's like, no.
Joyce is at her house,
Brings her new landline in.
and she just kind of sets it up. Then you do go to the quarry, which I've also been to the quarry.
Oh, really? Shit.
I did like them talking about like whether or not you would survive a
Yeah.
fall.
George Burns did it on a $5 bet. And I love that literally he goes, George Burns is a liar. If you hit going that fast at that height, the water would hit you like cement and break every bone in your body. A little foreshadowing for something that happens a little further down the line in this season. And then he gets a radio call from Flo telling him he's got to go to Benny's right away.
Yeah. And before we talk about Benny's, just if you know, you're divine.
Oh my God. Guys, it takes a lot to make me cry reading a fan fiction. Sobbing when I read that. I was like, oh my God. So a total if you know, you know.
We get to Benny's and we see that it's been set up to look like a suicide.
Clearly the regulars probably, found him like that. Like this is honestly the moment that I kind of almost fell in love with Hopper as a character.
Yeah,
it made him seem more real because first they go, Powell goes suicide and Hopper sadly looks down at the corpse and goes, Callahan and Powell go, wow, Hop, missing kid, a suicide all in 1 week must make you feel like some big city cop. And what does he say in response?
You get a little bit more of the history of Hopper because they say must feel like a big city cop again.
Yep.
Which is like our clue that Hopper was a cop in the city previous to what he's doing now. And his line was, I mostly dealt with strangers then. Benny was my friend. So you find out that like he was friends with Benny and like this is definitely going to affect him more than just like some mysterious death of some stranger in the city. So
it just tears your heart out. But it's such a great line, though, and I tell people it all the time. I'm like, that's just one particular, scene that kind of really stood out to me that I was like, this, like you said, we get a glimpse of maybe what Hopper did beforehand, and he's like, nothing against Powell and Callahan, but they're goofballs, like a man is dead. And Hopper right away, just the expression on his face, it looks like something isn't right. And yet again, like you said, you don't know how this is going to affect him. And it makes him just seem so much more human just by that one line.
And then I think we see that Jonathan is
In
driving to see
Indianapolis.
Lonnie. Yeah. When they say the city, that is Indianapolis. Yeah.
And he's driving, for you car aficionados, a Ford LTD, which back when my father was alive, he would always make a comment on it. He'd go, "What a shitbox." And I guess my mother, God rest her soul, had 3 of them and wrecked all 3 of them. My mom was not a good driver. And literally, like, I guess it was a tank of a car, but it was just kind of a shitbox, which kind of would make sense. And he drives it, which I do like the one time we see it in season 4, that it's just completely dead in the driveway.
Dead. Rusted.
Never forget. But I like that he arrives at Lonnie's and he goes into his little cape and his girlfriend's there. And Cynthia, I believe her name is. And, Jonathan I do have to applaud him. He's kind of like, like, get out of my way, is looking for Will, thinking maybe he's there. And then Lonnie comes in and kind of shoves him against the wall. And, he's like, he tries to hug him. And I love that Jonathan's like, get off me, man.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so satisfying. And I love that he goes, "Cynthia, I want you to meet Jonathan, my oldest." So this is Jonathan's dad.
Do we cut back and forth a little bit with this scene?
We go over to when Lucas and Dustin come over.
Yeah. So we do get more with Lonnie after that. But Lucas and Dustin go over to the Wheelers after school, and basically, again, they're arguing about what should be done, and they are trying to get her to go. This is when she slams the door, right?
Yeah, because we forgot to mention it when he's given the tour of the room. She sees the photo of Will when they win the science contest, was it?
I think she's attracted to like the shiny trophy.
Probably.
And then she kind of like starts looking closer, and it's a trophy for them winning the science fair. He says that they've won the science fair every year until last year when they got 3rd place. And Mr. Clark said it was totally political.
I died that line. Died.
But I really do want to know like what they did their science fair projects on.
Right?
But I love that connection that they like are good at science fair projects, because Elle is like the ultimate science fair project, if you ask me. But then she sees the photo of the 4 of them and zeroes in on Will, and he's like, "Wait, like, Will?" And so they're trying to explain that, and Lucas doesn't really, believe that she knows him, but she gets frustrated and she slams the door, which is the first time she shows the boys her, her superpowers.
And it's the first time, too, that you see her start getting a nosebleed by using it, which is, I think I said this a few episodes ago, with Stephen King's Firestarter, which is now streaming on Netflix. Only watch the original with Drew Barrymore. Just avoid the Zac Efron remake at all costs. But in the 1984 movie, the good one, the dad, every time he uses his power, his nose bleeds.
This is what I forgot to tell you, Stacy.
Did you watch it?
I have a surprise for you. I watched Firestarter.
Time out. Okay.
I wanted to tell you on the podcast.
I am happier than a kid on Christmas.
It was really, really, really good. And like everything that you said, like I wanted to just kind of watch it and not like analyze it for all the Stranger Things connections yet, but they're obviously there.
Packed.
Like it's packed with them. Like, so you can totally see how much inspiration they got from that movie.
That makes me so happy.
It's so good. Drew Barrymore is like adorable. Like,
yeah, she is the OG 11 if you think about it.
It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking. And that score from Tangerine Dream.
Yep. So good. Yeah. And the dad is very good.
Yep. I'm so happy. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. Yes, it can get a little cheesy, but I do love that it's all practical effects. Like, that's a massacre at the end.
Yeah.
And it's just so, so cool. And Drew Barrymore, like, showed what an incredible actress she was back then. But you can definitely see that the Duffer Brothers took a lot of inspiration from this. But the nosebleed is the thing that, like, first I kind of went, oh, look at that. So
Yeah.
that makes me so happy, Megan.
And then I think we go back to Indy with
Yep.
Lonnie and Jonathan. And so Lonnie kind of implies that like Joyce is making him out to be worse than he kind
He
of
actually
is.
is.
And I do believe that there's kind of like two sides to every story, and
Yep.
Joyce does seem a little crazy and
Mm.
like maybe hasn't really let Lonnie have the chance to kind of be a father because like their relationship didn't work out. And I think we have enough evidence to not like Lonnie, like
Mm.
we've talked about last week and this week. But I think it was interesting. They probably did set that up because
Yep. I know what you're about to say.
yeah. So they set that up with like, I did want to see you. That's your mom talking, like where they were going to have Lonnie come back at the
Yep.
end instead of Steve Harrington and kind of give him that chance to have like a little bit of a redemption and
Yep.
fight off the Demogorgon with Jonathan. So that was interesting. I feel like they might have like written or filmed that scene of him and
Mhm.
Jonathan and like those things that he said to Jonathan when they thought that maybe they were going to let him have sort of a little bit of a redemption arc.
Absolutely.
I think that that's probably where that came from in that scene.
Mm.
And I don't think it's necessarily going to be like a storyline that comes back in season 5 at all.
No, I feel like Lonnie's story is basically done if you think about it. I mean, I
Yeah.
love that actor, but and he did a fantastic job, but it was kind of from start to finish, when he came in, when he came back, then when he left. But I would love to read an original script. I mean, it worked out. Thank you, Joe Keery, for being so damn charming. But I would love to read the original pilot script just to see what has changed and what stayed the same.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And you said that he was in Jurassic Park: The Lost World.
He is. It's only like a little cameo in the beginning where he makes the T-Rex arms in front of Jeff Goldblum, but he's a character actor, and I know him best from one of the Amityville sequels in the 90s. He's a little cutie pie, but now I just associate him with Lonnie, and I'm like, you're just trying to pay off your gambling debts. I do like Jonathan's line, though, when he's like searching through his car, and he then gives him the flyer, and he goes, here, in case you forgot what he looks like
Yeah.
for you, Jonathan.
Then we're at the police station, and one of the guys that was at the diner at Benny's is talking to Hopper and brings up the boy that was trying to steal food
Yep.
from Benny the day before. And Hopper, obviously, with his awesome detective skills,
Yep.
and he's like, wait, like, there's a connection here, right? Like,
Mhm.
could that have been Will? But I think they were also talking about how it was suspicious, like, that Benny would commit suicide because it's like
Yeah.
he was excited to go fishing and he didn't really have
Mhm.
any enemies. He had some exes that didn't like him very much, but like it doesn't make sense that he would commit suicide. We go back to the Wheeler house. We're definitely all over the place in this
We are
episode.
bouncing back and forth, and we see Nancy, and she's on the phone with Barb. And I can't believe she convinced her to do this. She's convincing her to lie to her parents and say that she's sleeping over Barb's house.
We forgot to mention this. So when Jonathan is leaving the school after putting up the missing posters, there's
Mhm.
like an announcement that there's going to be an assembly
Yep.
for support of Will being missing. And so Nancy is going to use this assembly as
And
an excuse to go hang out at Steve Harrington's house.
like, I just love that she's basically like, Barb, come and be a fifth wheel. And
Right.
like, we've all been in that situation, where you kind of want your friend to come with you for support, but Barbara's like, why would I want to go? And she's like, it's easy. Just say you're staying over my place. And she already has a story cooked up, like you said. And she almost like doesn't take no for an answer. And she's like, I'll see you in an hour, and just hangs up. And I'm like, damn, girl. And we all know who's in the driver's seat there.
Oh, but I mean, then she makes Barb literally drive her. Like,
I'm like, Nancy, you piece of shit. Like, I'd be like, I gotta use my gas and be a fifth wheel. Like, you're a turd.
But then we get yet another entertaining family dinner at the Wheelers.
I feel like every scene at that dinner table, like, is just fantastic, no matter what.
Yeah, especially because Lucas and
Dustin are coming over to eat.
Have stayed over for dinner. Yes.
Which I do love that they're eating meatloaf, which who doesn't love that? And literally Karen kind of notices the boys are acting a little weird and Dustin isn't eating. And I love that she's like, something wrong with the meatloaf. And Justin's like, I ate like 2 bologna sandwiches today at lunch. And then he goes, I don't know why.
And Lucas is like, me too.
Me too.
It's like comedy gold, I think. But then Elle comes down from upstairs. She chooses this moment to go down into the basement. And I think Holly sees her.
I think so too. And I think that's why she's a little more freaked out from the loud noise, because she sees somebody. But I do love that Dustin pulls a me. Dustin screams Stacy energy, because in a panic situation, when in doubt, make a loud noise. So he like slams his fist down, and then what does he say? Like it was a spasm or something?
Yeah.
I can't.
Exactly. It's fantastic. And then I'm pretty sure that before we go back down into the basement, we go see the search party.
Which I've never noticed this before. Now, many, many eons ago, I was against like subtitles unless the film already had subtitles. Now I'm at that age. I'm like, I need subtitles. And also you pick up dialogue you wouldn't have like seen before. And this was one of those times that when they're, doing the search party at night, searching through the woods, Callahan almost asks, like, do you think that kid that was at Benny's was really the buyer's kid? And Hopper says, tell you what, when we find him, we'll ask him. And Powell says, and I was like, damn, Powell. He goes,
yeah, you can't ask a corpse
a question, which I was like, you son of a bitch, to think you become sheriff one day. Well, we see how that went. And I'm just like, damn. But that's when they make a discovery. Mr. Clark does.
Yes. So Mr. Clark, suspicious. No, but I do like they're actually searching near Benny's diner now because they have that like lead on, oh, there was like a kid at Benny's diner. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
And the tunnel, the drain that they find, Mr. Clark finds that missing piece of hospital gown that we had seen when we first see 11 in the woods.
Yeah.
So she tears her hospital gown as she's like crawling out of the tunnel.
Well, I'm wondering if in season 5 they're going to explain like how she remembered the tunnel, because
I was curious about that too, because obviously we know that Henry told her about the tunnel and he was trying to get her to escape, but she didn't remember any of that.
Yeah, she like,
which, hold on, little bit of like a mind fuck here, but
let's do it.
I haven't dove deep into this theory, but I did see something about how the Nina Project, all of that stuff that they showed 11 to get her memories back could have not happened. Could have been like brainwashing.
Could you imagine that was all made up?
I mean, I need to like maybe rewatch season 4 when we rewatch season 4, kind of like keeping that like in the back of my mind as a potential.
Because it didn't hit me until last night. How many times have I seen this episode? But I remember when I saw season 4 and Henry shows the tunnel. And again, Leo point, I went, oh my God, that's how she escapes. And I thought, because I kept forgetting that it was 1979, I thought it was like literally 83 leading into the events of season 1. But then I was like, how did she remember the tunnel? Which maybe we'll find out, maybe we won't. But clearly that was her means of escape.
I can't even like dwell too much on that because it's like I said, total mind fuck. Like
we'll go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, exactly. But then we go back to the Wheeler house and we have the boys talking to Elle again. And I loved this sweet moment of like, they're talking about Will and the friend thing,
What a
but they,
friend means. Yep.
yes, she's like, well, what's a friend? So they're like explaining friendship.
Especially when there's spit.
So this again is Dustin and Lucas. So I think it's Lucas spits in his hand and like he's like a
Chase
spit
Dustin's
swear, like you can't back out of it. And then the way that Dustin just like looks at his hand,
wipes his hand on his pants. Like it's background acting like that I'm just like, this is why you're amazing, Dayton.
yeah, this is why we love him so much. We cut to Barb's car. This scene with Nancy and Barb in the
It kills
car.
me. I love that they first park 2 blocks away.
3 blocks away.
3 blocks. Jesus, I would be bullshit. 3 blocks away because she's afraid that one of his neighbors will see the car and call his parents.
Yeah.
Like Barb is like, this is stupid. And she's like, he's just trying to get into your pants. And, Nancy's just trying to play it off. And she says, Tommy and Carol are going to be there. And I love that Barb is like, Tommy and Carol have been having sex since the 7th grade. She's like, it's probably going to be one big orgy when you get there. I died.
And then Nancy is changing her shirt
Oh
and
my God.
Barb is like, is that a new bra?
I love the expression on her face. She's like, no, which I do have to say, I know in a further episode, she talks about how the weekend before she spent all day looking for a top that she thought Steve would like. That's probably one of my favorite outfits that Nancy actually wears.
I don't know if I even know what she's wearing.
Striped shirt, but it really is flattering. So I do love that they play Troopers Raise a Little Hell when
Yes,
they get
as
to
Steve opens the door.
the double doors. First of all, that house, I really, really hope I'm going to be able to visit when we're down in Georgia. And somebody was
been.
like, you lucky son of a bitch. First of all, it's a massive house. And I think you're led to believe it's in Loch Nora, where kind of the rich people live. And somebody like pointed out that technically the house has like 6 garages, which I'm like, whoo, that's a big house. And it's a very different structure to say the least, but
Yeah.
very 80s. And I do love that it's double doors. And Steve does his iconic "Hello, ladies," which
Yeah.
whew, I wouldn't be mad about the 3 blocks anymore. I can tell you that. I'd be like, it's fine.
Then we cut to Hopper back at his house. Like, he was just at the search party, and I guess they finally called it a quits because they found the tunnel, but he's kind of like relieving some stress, I guess.
Yeah, I
Like
guess
with his
so.
female friend, which do we ever
Sandra.
see this woman again?
I don't think so. I only knew her name because of the
Because of the
subtitles.
subtitles. I was gonna say the same thing. Like,
Maybe
you
subtitles.
don't know her name, but the subtitles do say, like, Sandra says. Like,
We're like, all right, I guess it's Sandra.
so I don't know who Sandra is. She's very pretty, though.
She is.
This is where he gets out of bed and walks outside, and he says he feels cursed, which is another kind of like theme that we have throughout the show that we
Yep.
get back in season 4.
Oh.
And I'm curious about whether there will be more connections to like things that happened before the show with Hopper, with the war and his daughter.
Mhm.
He says that the last person to go missing was in the
person.
summer of 1923, and the last suicide was in the fall of 1961. So things don't really happen in Hawkins.
It's a small,
And
safe
now
town.
he's the chief of police, and all of this stuff is like happening. So like, why is this happening to me? And she's very sweet, and she's like, when was the last person to freeze to death? Like, come inside and keep me warm.
And
like,
you almost like see like right away, he's almost looks a little like he can't talk to her. Like he kind of looks a little discouraged, and he's like, I'll be
Yeah.
in a second. But that was a great connection that made, because I still say that his monologue that he delivers in season 4 is probably one of the most powerful. And you learn so much about a character by just telling like a paragraph worth of dialogue. So that was a great kind of like first hint in that. So we go back to
Mike's basement. I love the Dungeons and Dragons connection here in this scene.
Mhm.
We're again talking about Will. She's trying to like explain where where he is. So she goes over and sits down at the board where they last were playing when we first opened, the last episode that we watched. And she picks up Will's character, which they're like, oh, superpowers. She knows that that's Will. Like, she can sense that, and clears the rest of the board and flips the board over. So this is where we
Flips
get
it
that.
upside
Yep.
down.
We get that upside down connection. And I do like that the like bottom of the board is like black, which is kind of like reflective of then we do see like when she is in that space, it's just that black water.
It's like a void.
Void. Yeah. And she puts Will there to show that that's where he is. Because we do think that kind of like the upside down is sort of that void, and that Will is the one. I feel like we've heard this, that Will is kind of the one that created like the Hawkins upside down, like through his mind. Like some people have said that he sort of has some sort of connection to the upside down is the one that kind of created that area of the upside down.
Mm-hmm.
She said that he's hiding, and they're like, well, what is he hiding from?
Oh.
And she grabs the Demogorgon.
Yeah.
And that's how we get that name for that monster, because the kids name it after the D&D character or the D&D monster.
Which is so cool that like
Demogorgon.
the three main villains, Demogorgon, Mind Flayer, and Vecna, are all D&D characters. I just really like that they kind of follow along this theme, but I do like that they say that he's hiding because, as Jonathan said earlier, he's really good at hiding. And just the music cue,
Right.
too. You're like, oh, shit, like, he's in trouble.
We go to Jonathan, and I have to say, when you first watch a show, you're suspicious of everyone, right?
Yeah.
And I do sort of like get vague flashbacks once in a while to like the very first time I watched the show, because when Jonathan parks on the side of the road and he opens his trunk, and I'm like thinking of when Tommy said like, what do you want to bet that he killed him? Like, I'm like, oh shit, like, does he have Will in his trunk? Like,
could you flippin' imagine?
I mean, I didn't know like the depth of like how dark this show was going to be when I first watched it. So it's like anything could have happened. So I apologize, Jonathan, for thinking thinking this of you. But just when he pulls up on the side of the road, opens the trunk, and you don't really know what he's doing, I thought the worst.
You were like, he's going to be burying a corpse.
Yeah. But he goes
to Mirkwood.
Yes, he went to Mirkwood. So he's got his camera, which we did find out in the first episode that he is a photographer. So he's looking for evidence. And this is when we find out how close Steve Harrington's house is to Mirkwood as well.
Which Steve Harrington, bougie, heated pool, in-ground heated pool. And they have I'll Melt With You playing, which I always think of the Burger King commercials, which, remember the upside down Whopper? Never forget. It's just a Whopper upside down. I would have bought it. And they're all kind of like partying. I'd be like, I need it. It's upside down. But literally, they're kind of like partying, and they're drinking beers, and you're seeing Steve shotgun a beer. And I do love that Nancy's like, is that supposed to impress me? And he's like, you're not. And, Tommy and Carol are kind of like, near the pool, fooling around. And Jonathan's taking photos of them. And I love that. Like, all right, I don't know. I'm not going to talk too much shit. But I'm just like, Barb, I get it. You're a fifth wheel baby, and this might not be your scene. But she was acting like a wet effing blanket from the beginning. Like, dude, like, I don't know. I'd be having a good time, good music, and there's booze. But Nancy tries to include her and have her shotgun, and she cuts her hand pretty bad. And of course, Tommy's like, gnarly. And she kind of bitchily is like, oh, I'm fine. And I'd be like, okay, I guess you are. And she goes inside.
I do think Steve was like trying to be helpful. He tells her where the bathroom is.
And I do like that, Steve says earlier, he's like, oh, you with all your, your studying and your band practice. And she's like, I'm so not in the band.
Yeah, well, she tells him that he's a cliche, which he
Hmm.
totally is, like that cool jock persona,
Yeah.
heartthrob, and he's like, "You're a cliche, Nancy Wheeler."
Yep.
They
Hmm.
both totally are at the beginning, which
At
we
the
love.
beginning.
We love the character development.
Yep. It's literally like a fine wine they develop. And that's when like Tommy pushes Carolyn and then Steve pushes Nancy in. And I love the shot of like Steve holding up Nancy's shoe and swimming away from her. So they're all being like silly assholes, even though it's November, but it's a heated pool. Cool. But Jonathan's snapping photos of them from
Yeah,
the woods.
yeah, I do
Not
love.
creepy at all.
I love that. It looks like they're having just so much fun swimming in the pool. Like, and
Yeah,
I
right?
mean, I try to be sympathetic of Barb because I totally get where she's coming from also with like Nancy is her friend and like they typically like talk badly about these people. Like
Hmm.
they're not into the same things as these popular cool kids and it just seems like Nancy's not being herself, like with drinking but it's like she is just trying to have fun and be a teenager. So it's like
Yeah.
you can't really fault her for that. I definitely see like the kind of like two sides of it, but
Shame you didn't have that beer, Barb. You would have been able to relax a little
I
bit.
know, and maybe you would have been inside and not sitting outside at the pool.
Because that doesn't end well. Just saying. Where do we go next?
We go back to the buyer's house. So Joyce is sitting there with her new phone and it rings. So it's Will calling again. She can actually hear him say mom. So
Mm,
we definitely know that it's him. And there's this power surge, which I just was thinking a lot again about like the mechanics of it. And it's interesting that he can sort of like control the lights and the
mm,
electricity. So it's almost like when he's trying to do it through the phone, it's like too much for the
yeah.
phone. And that's why it keeps like getting zapped or whatever. Because immediately he kind of switches gears and is trying to get her attention through the lights and through the stereo, turning the
Yeah.
stereo on. She's following the lights, seeing the light bulb glowing. But then something happens and the wall it gets quiet, the lights go down, the wall stretches out. So it's we think the Demogorgon has
Yeah.
kind of like chased Will away and is in that space.
It's very Nightmare on Elm Street. There's an iconic shot. Mind you, Nightmare on Elm Street did it practical and it still hasn't aged. They did it with spandex,
Okay.
making the wall expand, which is just so cool. The CGI, it's CGIs. We'll leave it at that. But at the time it was 2016, and you're meant to believe that something is coming through the wall, which we believe is the Demogorgon. And of course, Joyce fucking
Books
freaks,
it. Yeah.
books it. But I do like that when she runs out to her car ready to leave, she hears the Clash playing again, the lights, and it's almost like my son's still in there in a way. And she
Yeah.
goes back.
It was an interesting callback at the end of the season because basically the exact same thing happens with Steve, who I
Hmm.
guess originally it might have been supposed to be Lonnie, but
Yeah.
he runs away at the first sign of this like trouble and he's sitting in his car and then he sees like the lights kind of start flickering again back in the house
Yeah.
and decides to go back in. So it was like almost exactly like paralleled to what Joyce
Hmm.
did in that scene. But she realizes, oh, like, okay, Will's back. And she does make that connection that it is Will. And he
Hmm.
goes back in to collect all the lamps that we see in the next the next episode. Do
That woman had so many lamps.
you have
I
that many
literally
lamps in your house? Then we cut back to the pool.
They go inside, which is this cute little like sunroom. I don't know. I'm a sucker for that. I was like, oh, that's nice. And I love that Tommy and Kara are like, we hear that Steve's mom has a fireplace in her room. And he's like, well, you're changing the sheets. So clearly they have money, the Harringtons. And, he asks if she's okay. And he's like, we'll get you some clothes. So they start going up the stairs, which if you really look at the decorations around that house, and like we've read so much goddamn fan fiction, like those stairs, I mean, stuff happens on those stairs. But I'm like, look at all the like the geese and like what the hell? But they're going up the stairs, and that's when Barb magically appears from the bathroom, and she's like, Nance, what are you doing? And I love that Nancy's like, I fell in the pool. I'm just gonna go change. And she knows what's gonna happen. So she's like, Nance, this isn't you. Which I'm not shaming this character, but let's just say I would have gone, do you see that going up these stairs? Let me get my dick. And then I'd run up the stairs. But that's just me. That's just Stace here. But it's like this, it's a great music cue because it's called This Isn't You. And it's a little sad because Barb does know Nance really well, and she doesn't want her to make a mistake she's going to regret. And clearly this is quite a big step. So she tells Nancy, kind of gets a little annoyed and is like, you can just go home. I'll get a ride. And she's like, I'm fine, Barb. Almost like, get the fuck out.
Right.
So Barb, I do have to hand it to her. She's a good enough friend that maybe she should have waited, in the living room, but she waits on the diving board.
Right. And maybe she should have just went home.
Yeah. So it is what it is, but she hangs around, and we go up to Steve's plaid bedroom.
And why is this the first time that girl in the white bikini was just like staring at my face?
I'm like, who's this bitch?
He's got the car poster on his wall too. But I don't know why like that girl in the white bikini was just like very prominent to me in that scene. And I had never really noticed her before. Jonathan's still snapping the photos out there.
He does look a little let down and a little heartbroken. And he does snap a few photos of Barb sitting on the diving board.
Right.
And we see Nancy, she decides to go for it.
Yeah.
So, her and Steve start going at it like two raccoons in a garbage can. And we hear, a really cool musical cue, but that's not before Barb. Her hand is bleeding from her little wound, and it's going into the water.
Yeah.
And she hears a noise. And when she turns, we hear something growl and a scream. And when Jonathan looks, because he was on his way walking back, she's gone.
Yeah. You do see this, like,
you see it for a millisecond.
Like, yes, it's like a flash of like a monster looking thing, but you get no like context of it. And then she's
yet again, the electricity is a flickering. And as, the two raccoons are going at it, we hear, what is it? The Bangles? Hazy Shade of Winter?
Did I realize that was like a cover of
a Simon and Garfunkel?
Yeah. So time, see what's become of me.
But a banger of an episode, a lot happens, and what a great way to end it. And just, I think that's just such a fantastic song because it's used in the 80s movie Less Than Zero. I know a lot of people, when it first aired, they're like, that song didn't come out until 1986. And I'm like, oh, stop picking it apart. Just enjoy the ride.
Yeah. And also, it's like, it's not like the characters were listening to that song. It's just like the music to set the theme for the credits and everything like that. So it's sort of like the Moby song. Like Moby, that didn't come out until later, right?
No, we weren't blessed with Moby just yet.
So definitely an epic end to the episode. There's just so much packed into that episode. Like,
oh my God.
And it's setting up so like all of the storylines that are going to continue throughout the season. Yeah. So we love Steve Harrington in this episode.
Yes, we do.
I think you appreciate Steve so much more on rewatches because you've seen his whole character development, and then you can go back and just like enjoy him.
Enjoy the ride, man.
Yeah, we had a lot of fun talking about this episode, and we are not going to talk about the third episode for 2 weeks. So again, we have that special guest for next week, which we will be talking about on social media soon. And I guess that's it for the episode, right?
I guess that's it. Yeah.
Let's talk briefly about filming updates.
Yeah, what's going on?
A few things. Raw Stuffer put out his kind of like update that he puts out every once in a while, and it looks like he has not really been on set much. It looks like they've been kind of in the writer's room. Like, looks like they've finished up or at least gotten a start on writing the very last episode, chapter 8,
Woo!
which crazy that it's
I
like
know.
almost finished. But there was some pictures of him and Matt and Kate Trayfree.
That's awesome.
They're playing a Jurassic Park pinball machine.
Nice. Respect.
And then you see the whiteboard for, chapter 8.
I cannot wait to see what they have planned.
But then Sean Levy was also, I think I don't exactly remember where he was interviewed. It might have been at CinemaCon, actually. And they were asking him about, because he usually directs episodes 3 and 4, which is interesting because I'm not sure if that pattern started with the first season. We'll have to look back because those are the 2 episodes that we're about to talk about next. But he is not on set right now because of other projects that he's been working on. So he said that he will be directing a later episode in the season, which is interesting because they're definitely filming 3 and 4 like around this time. The other thing that I've seen is that they were talking about that country club and like the mansion and stuff like that. And somebody did notice that some of the houses around that area are basically Loch Nora, and it could be flashbacks to like the trick-or-treating. So when they went trick-or-treating in Loch Nora, some of the houses around there looked familiar. Yeah.
That's cool.
Did you see anything else for filming?
They've done a few like close-ups. Mind you, this is nothing official. One of the bigger houses, maybe in Loch Nora, it looked like there were a lot of like video games, like arcade games. And then there were some characters that were dressed pretty 80s, like standing around like the end of a driveway.
Yeah, and there's been some shots of the radio station van. And it looked like maybe Joyce was driving the radio station.
Yeah, it's either her or her stand-in, but it definitely looks like the character Joyce.
Exactly. Yeah, so the radio station van is giving me like Surfer Boy Pizza vibe, like that it's going to be like an iconic type like
vehicle.
Vehicle in season 5, which I'm excited about.
I'm really hoping that if Steve, you know how the Beamer now has like an antenna, a huge antenna. I hope they make a mini model of that. We need to own it.
Oh my gosh, that would be so cool. And that would be giving me sort of like DeLorean vibes, like like an iconic car.
Love that.
So what about merch, Stace? Anything cool for merch this week?
How do I pronounce it again?
So this is the Etsy shop that you wanted to shout out. It looks like, well, I'm saying like Tyrannus, like Tyrannosaurus Rex, but if it's that, it's like Arstyrannus.
We're gonna go with that. What Megan said, everyone, because I'll butcher it. So it's this great Etsy shop that I've been buying from and getting stuff sent to for quite some time. They're an amazing artist, and they make these really cute little charms and keychains. One of my favorite is they do the Fruity Four. And it's a little Steve, Nancy, Robin, and Eddie floating around in what looks like a snack bag. And it's like blown up plastic. I don't know how they do it.
That sounds awesome.
They make cute little prints for Stranger Things and buttons. But they also make this really adorable thing, which actually I got you one, surprise, surprise, where it's, you remember Book It back in school through Pizza Hut? Instead of Book It, it's Scoop It. So you get a button that says Scoop It, and then you got a whole thing of like scoop stickers, So maybe we'll use a sticker each time we rewatch an episode or something. But I look for like real original stuff like that. So absolutely wanted to give them a shout out. They come out with the cutest stuff. And just my second shout out, I know we've mentioned this artist before because they've worked on actually a lot of official Netflix stuff before, but Butcher Billy.
Oh, yeah. Butcher Billy.
Their artwork
amazing.
Is absolutely to die for. I'm lucky enough to own a print of the piggyback and the dive. I definitely want to get the Dear Billy. But I've seen so many friends of ours, they have his work framed and it's all the episodes down like a hallway or in their living room. so eye-catching, and he's worked on the official, like trading cards, and he made that really cool Eddie one where it said alive in the upside down. So
Yeah.
maybe he knows something we don't. I
I
don't know.
don't know. Fingers crossed. But yeah, that's awesome. And his vibe is just so cool. And yeah, really love his art. Seems like a
Mm.
cool guy too. So yeah, great shout outs today.
Woo!
Well, this has been quite the long episode. So thanks for sticking with us if you stuck around to the end. And be sure to kind of check in with our social media to see any announcements about our guest for next week. And also just to let us know what you're liking about these rewatch episodes. Look us up, talk to us, tell us what you're thinking, and we will keep rewatching and bringing you along for the ride as we deep dive into season 1.
All right, guys, over and out.
Over and out.
Eddie, I'm not sure I love the idea of you driving.
Oh, I'm starting to suck her. Harrington's got her. Don't you, big boy?
And we're back.
We're back.
Welcome back. This is our secret segment where we talk mostly about Steady, which Steve Harrington, Eddie Munson, fan fiction, which we know that's not for everybody. So if you're not into fan fiction, that's okay. This was quite long enough. We will see you next week. But if you want to hang around to see what we've been reading this week, please feel free. So, Stacy, what have you been reading?
Well, I have been reading quite a lot. I'm hoping to read some more over this break.
Oh, yeah, it's break. We're going to have to make sure we save enough time next week because I'm sure you're going to have lots to talk about.
You know me. So I actually read the road trip story, which is what
Accidentally absconding with an impulsive idiot. Wasn't it so good?
it was so good. And it's a one-shot, too. It's a longer one-shot, but I absolutely loved it. It was really hot. And I just loved the ending to it. And I was like, I don't know. It's just like, love that. Great recommendation.
Yeah.
So I read that. And then I read another one shot, which I sent to you. I don't think you've gotten a chance to read it
I
yet.
haven't read it yet. No.
Oh, my Atlanta. So I found it through Twitter, X. And it's June 27th, 1993, where Steve and Robin are in San Francisco at a pride parade, and they assumed that Eddie died, but really he lived and he was given a new identity. And Steve spots him across the street, and we'll leave it at that. But holy moly, I was grasping my pearls by how fucking hot it was.
That's
Woo!
awesome.
They get down and dirty, and it's wonderful. And then the last thing that I actually read, it was recommended, the Omegaverse. I'm really not into it. But someone was like, this is actually a really good story. And it's called Lost for a Long Time, Two Parallel Lines. And basically, Eddie's an alpha, Steve's an omega, if I'm getting that right. They hook up while they're in high school. And Steve ends up getting pregnant, but he never tells Eddie because Eddie wants to be a rock star and he doesn't want to hold him back. And you find out that him and Robin, they're best friends already. He inherits like a tiny little house in the country and he decides from his grandmother and he decides, I'm going to leave town without telling anybody where I'm going. Robin goes with him and he's going to have the baby. And basically you follow over the course of a couple of years how Eddie's living his life and he always wonders like what happened to Steve. And then you see Steve kind of struggling as a single parent. And it's really cute. It's like an alternate universe. Like he goes to work at Benny's and Claudia is like his babysitter. But usually, like I'm a sucker for Dad Steve Harrington, but they make his son's name is Teddy. It is the most adorable little toddler. Like it's supposed to be like a little Ed clone. And Steve bought him a little Snoopy when he was a newborn. He calls it Noopy because he can't pronounce Snoopy. And it's really cute. And eventually Eddie comes back in the picture. It's not finished yet because the chapters are long, but obviously it takes them a while. But usually that kind of story isn't my bag, but it's pretty adorable and pulls on the heartstrings. So that is what
that sounds like a cool dad Steve setup. I know you definitely like Steve as a parent. I have not read a lot of Steve as a parent, but I like the title of that story. I was like
Mm.
trying to figure out what it was, and it's a lyric from a Noah Kahan song. So I was like, yes.
Recognize that. I love that.
I love Noah. But yeah, that sounds cool. And I have not read a ton this week, but I have been continuing with roll to 1 on the check, roll to 20 on the save, which is the modern AU. Eddie is the professional dungeon master, and the boys are getting Steve to play with them. And I got to the part where I get Eddie's point of view. And so, like, just getting to know him. Gareth is like his friend who
I
like
swear to
created the
God,
app.
I think because I started that as well. I forgot to mention it. I think I'm at the
Yeah.
same exact chapter you're at.
Yeah, where I'm like, "Oh, it's Eddie." I was so excited.
Now, Garrett's in that chapter you're mentioning, right?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and, like, apparently Gareth made, like, the app that the boys, like, matched with Eddie as a DM on.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh, I wanted to shout out, Slide Over Here, Tell Me a Story, our friend Jen.
Yes.
Did you read this? It's a
I haven't yet.
microfic.
I can't
So
wait.
it's really good, and it's just a, like, hot little story, but
Ooh.
the whole premise is there's no dialogue in the story.
What?
So it's all, like, right after they, like, say something to each other, and then they, like, get together, but, like, just all action, no words. And the one other thing that I wanted to shout out, because I have not read this yet, but I just remembered that I really wanted to read it because I downloaded it, so I'm definitely gonna read it next. But do you remember when Joe Keery and Joseph Quinn were at the Vanity Fair after party? I think it was really fun to kind of, like, picture if that was Steve and Eddie.
Oh,
And on X, Twitter or whatever, there was this really great Twitter thread of, like, them seeing each other at this Oscars after party, not as Joe Keery and Joseph Quinn, but as Steve Harrington and Eddie Munson. And it was,
ooh.
like, famous exes, like, so they're both famous and they're exes, and then they, like, see each other and kind of, like, reconnect at this party. And I just thought the premise was so great. They both looked so good at that
Oh,
after party. So picturing them in character is really fun and like a modern AU. But Mix Adams, they were the ones that did the Twitter thread, but then they ended up writing like a 5-chapter
oh.
fic
Send me
and
the
kind of
link to
expanded
that.
on it. Yeah, so I remembered that, but I hadn't read it yet, and the other day I was like, "I need to download this. This is what I'm reading next."
Hell
So,
yeah.
definitely gonna read that this week, and I'm super excited about it.
Woo!
So that's pretty much it, and if you have any good recs, you can always send them our way,
Absolutely.
and we will continue to let you know what we are reading so you can read it too if you want.
Get your steady on.
All right. Well, we will see you next week. Have a great week. Well, we will not see you, but we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah.
And over and out.
Over and out.